I'm having an unusual morning. I have one little kid watching Frosty the Snowman and another one that's still sleeping at 7:30, which never happens. It might be because he was up at like 10 o'clock last night talking to me about how he wanted me to make an orange Julius smoothie for him in the morning. He had a lot to say last night. He was just talking and talking and talking and talking. So I think I hope he just rests. Let us get through this live together. And a little extra rest is never a bad thing. He's battling a cold. It's a tough life for a 4-year-old, you know? You got a lot going on in that little body. So, speaking of a lot going on, a couple of things I want you guys to know about, because you're going to see some headlines throughout the day about 2 major events overseas, and I just want to give you a little bit of background to know what's going on there. I think probably the most important thing to mention is a suspected terrorist attack that happened in France at one of the most famous Christmas markets in Europe. It's one of those outside vendor fairs with like 300 different stalls. I took a look at it. It looks really cool. And in Strasbourg, I hope I'm saying that right. It's very close to the border with Germany. Apparently a man well known to authorities with a very sketchy past, a really deep arrest record, had spent time in prison, had thought to been radicalized in prison, opened fire right near the market. And just so you know, the numbers have changed drastically. We see a lot of changes when terrorist attacks happen when it comes to numbers of fatalities and casualties, but in this one in particular, it's really moved around a lot. Right now, it looks like at least 2 people have been killed, another one severely injured, and several others that have been severely injured as well. So we're continuing to get information on that, and the suspected terrorist that is known to authorities is still at large. So if you see news about that, know that this is an ongoing story. France has raised its terror alert, which means they're going to add more security at the borders and add more security at public events. But you guys know, because we've been talking about this, that France has been through so much over the last 4 weeks with so many public protests against the government and taxation. And that's mainly based in Paris, although it's been, around the countryside as well. But, this is upheaval in France at a very difficult time. And so terrible to have a terrorist attack as well, always. What do you want? A banana. I don't know if we have any. Oh, we do. Okay, so that's one thing I want you to know about. The second thing I want you to know about has to do with what's happening in England. Well, really the UK. The British Prime Minister, Theresa May, is facing this no confidence vote, which basically means that she could be removed from power at exactly the time that she's trying to navigate Brexit, which is the exit of the UK from the EU. This is basically like a divorce deal. You can. Here you go, bud. Do you want what? One of the things that we did is we downloaded all the classic Christmas specials from like the 1960s. They're really cute. Here you go. You're welcome. What good manners. Thank you for showing up in front of the public. Okay, here you go. You can watch one more thing. So basically what you should think about is, let's watch this, huh? No? Okay. Basically what you should know about this is that this is like a divorce deal where the 2 sides don't agree on what's going on, and they're going back to the drawing board, except there's no drawing board to go back to. And the EU says, listen, this is the deal. We can renegotiate along the edges a little bit, but this is the deal for you guys to exit. And the UK some of the lawmakers are like, we don't like this deal. And we don't like Theresa May leading us on this deal. And so this is a lot of chaos. This vote about Theresa May, and this vote of confidence, they call it, will take place around midday here, early afternoon Central Time. So if you see headlines on that, that's what's going on there. Okay, let's get to the news of the day here in the United States, because everything really is going to be revolving around the sentencing for Michael Cohen. He's the former personal attorney for President Trump, and he's facing sentencing for basically campaign violation, payments to women for non-disclosure agreements before the presidential campaign of 2016. You know these stories. He's also facing, this question about whether or not he truly cooperated with authorities or not. And so that's going to impact his sentencing. We're watching this really closely because here's the update about what's happened with the special counsel so far. Special counsel, you're going to feel like you've heard about it forever because you have. It's been about 18 months, 19 months of the special counsel investigation. There's been more than 30 indictments that include some Russians, not just Americans, and Russian companies, but Americans as well. Some of the Americans, like National Security Advisor Michael Flynn is also facing sentencing, but it looks like he cooperated with the investigation, and so the likelihood he's facing any significant prison time isn't super high, but we'll see. Michael Cohen, the former attorney for President Trump, looks like he could face the most significant sentencing. The reason why there's a lot of attention on him as well is because there was inference in these memos that the special counsel released that could implicate the president in these campaign finance violations, would be breaking the law. None of the paperwork has suggested that the president has colluded with the Russians in any way, did anything to impact the results of the election when it comes to toxic relationships with the Russians, which was supposed to be. Okay, hold on, bud. Which was supposed to be the whole point of this, right? We thought, okay, the special counsel investigation is going to investigate whether or not there's any of these sort of strange relationships and collusion between the Trump campaign, Trump administration, and the Russians. It's very hard to take the request of the 2-year-old. Which one, bud? This one. No. This is gonna. How about this one? Okay. But if you look at the special counsel order, it is completely open for the special counsel to investigate anything that they find along the way. So that's why all these different charges are coming up about all sorts of different things. Okay, really quick. Sorry for all these interruptions. What you need to know is there's a lot of folks throwing around this term of impeachment. The reason why they're doing it is several-fold. There's definitely politics involved, but there's also this question about whether or not the Department of Justice, if they found that any president was guilty of a crime, could indict a president. There's a huge legal debate about whether that can happen. And the reason is that the Department of Justice, if they had the power to indict the president, then somehow would be more powerful than the executive branch, right? They could totally undermine the executive branch, which is not the way that the government's supposed to be set up. So the question then becomes about whether or not a president could be indicted after leaving office or could be impeached, which is the way that Congress can have oversight over what happens with our leaders. What you should know is the House of Representatives has oversight. They have oversight of our money. They're in charge of the purse of government, and they have oversight over all sorts of different things, which is why they have all the committees. So the House of Representatives can say, there's enough here that we're going to impeach the president because of a suspected crime or bad behavior. And they can go ahead with it even if the president is not facing an official charge, any president, not just this president. So that's why people are talking about it. There's also talk about it because once the House of Representatives has a Democrat majority, which will happen at the end of January because of the midterm election of 2018, then with a Democratic majority, there's a likelihood that if they wanted to do that, they could, but it's not quite as easy as everyone's making it. I think a lot of Democrats are talking about impeachment because it's a very powerful word, it gets a lot of attention. And they're also going to check out, what's the public reaction to this? Because no one, Democrat or Republican, is going to impeach someone that's very popular with the public. That would be bad for them politically. But, there's there are conversations about this, floating this idea, this could be an impeachable offense. It could be, but it doesn't mean that they're going to do it. So just know that the House of Representatives has the power to do it, but at the end of the day, even if they impeached a president, like they did with President Bill Clinton, he wasn't removed from office because the Senate controls whether or not that happens. So that's a little bit of a civics lesson. I had to go back through. There's a great article that's posted actually on the Senate website describing impeachment, and I'm going to link to it because if you have a couple minutes to read it, I think it'll be so informative for all the talk. We've really avoided a lot of this talk about impeachment on Smarter News because it's not happening yet. And it's very political. And I'm not interested in just giving platforms for people's political agendas. But because of the charges against Michael Cohen and because of the Democrats taking the majority of the House, I think it's worth it to know a little background about how that would happen if it ever did. So that's what you should know. In the meantime, you have the president in a huge debate with Democrats yesterday over the border wall and border security and what's going to happen with potentially a government shutdown by the end of next week. What you should know about that just briefly is that the entire government would not shut down if they could not find some sort of spending agreement that would get us through next year, but it still wouldn't be good. The president wants $5 billion for a border wall. Democrats want to repeat what everyone agreed upon last year, including the president, which was $1.3 billion for border security, which included money for a fence, which, by the way, is a very big fence that sort of looks like a wall, but isn't exactly a wall. So this will be interesting as comes up and develops over the next several days and really it's going to be about 10 days, and they have to face a deadline next Friday of figuring out some sort of agreement. So that's also happening at the same time that we're watching what's going on with the special counsel investigation. But today is a big day for the special counsel investigation because of the sentencing of Michael Cohen, again, personal attorney for President Trump, that could face the most amount of jail time of anyone that's been indicted so far. Okay, that's my cue. That's my 4-year-old. All right, I hope that's clear. Let me know if you have any questions, and continue to check out our site for enhancements.